Welcome back to the Horror Academic, and we are once again treading that fine line between horror and science fiction as we continue to look at the films in the Alien cycle. Today we're going to be talking about Aliens from 1986, director James Cameron, and the big difference of what genre changes happen here is that where Alien was clearly a mashup of horror and science fiction, Aliens has now added a third genre to that mix, which is action, or as some may want to claim it, a war movie, because you have literally space marines. So that's a valid kind of interpretation. I know I've mentioned this in the past, but looking at the original Alien trilogy, the saying used to be, or at least I would discuss this with friends, and it was always, Alien is a science fiction movie, Aliens is an action movie, and Alien 3 is the horror film. So we're gonna verge a little bit on that and say that Aliens is the one that is all three. So what is different and what makes Aliens important and not just Alien being kind of like the be-all end-all for the cycle? So what's interesting with Aliens is that we have a lot of the same crossing over of themes. We have the idea that we are still anti-colonialism, we are anti-corporation, and we're still bringing in characters like Ripley. Ripley is that current line that goes through the entirety of these parts of the series. So those concepts are also the Weyland Corporation that is now named has become the dominant corporation. I would even go out there to say galaxy. I was going to say on the planet Earth, but we could say far beyond that. And they are reaching their tendrils out even further than they had before. We start the movie and Ripley, Sigourney Weaver, is waking up because her ship has been found. Her ship, the Nostromo's from the first film, has kind of washed ashore, as we could say, as it got closer to Earth colonies. You kind of experience with Ripley this kind of realization that the world moved on without her, and we find out that she is now in the future. 57 years have passed since the story that takes place in Alien. We find out that she is in a hospital on this colony, or in this outpost from the colony. We find out in this hospital that the hospital too is owned by Weyland, and we now understand that Weyland kind of owns everything. The character that kind of guides us through kind of the passage of time from the first film to now the second is played by Paul Reiser, and he plays the character of Burke. Now, Burke is a corporate man. He's not military, he's not scientific, he is part of the corporation. He is the representative for the corporation who has been told that Ripley is his problem. So he's updating her, he's prepping her so she can speak to a panel that is made up from the corporation to discuss the incident of her last trip. So Ripley, by saving her own life, turns out the corporation really doesn't care because they're looking at the dollar signs. They see that it was at the expense of a very expensive piece of equipment, which was their ship. They are not quite as interested in the facts as to how everyone died and don't seem particularly distressed over her alien encounter. The other thing we find out about this is that because they think there's nothing wrong where she was. So much, in fact, that they've got a colony that's been there for quite a while now. So the other thing we really find out about Ripley now is that when she left, she had a daughter who was going to be turning 11. Well, 57 years has passed. We find out now that that daughter has recently passed away. So we have Ripley at the point where she understands that the company doesn't care about her. And she understands that because of them, she lost out on a good deal of her own life. So Ripley kind of represents us in this story trying to figure out what's going to happen next, where her ship just came from. We see a little later in the story that basically Ripley has had to be kind of readjusted into society. She's went from being a ship first mate, essentially, or pilot, to being now kind of a manual laborer on the docks. But this little piece of information will come in handy later. That's the basic premise setup of this story. And of course, something's gone wrong on the colony, and of course the company says, well, Ripley's been there, send her. She's kind of forced into a situation where she can't really say no, and she has to go out there with this group of space marines to kind of find out what has happened to this colony that is no longer responding. And, you know, things are going to go bad. That's why we're here. So I did mention before that the director of this film is James Cameron. So when we think of James Cameron now, if Spielberg had the 80s, we can say that Cameron had the 90s as far as American filmmakers. So what we see with James Cameron at this point in his career, he had done Piranha 2, he had done the original Terminator. So by giving Cameron, who at this point had 2 films under his belt, which were, you know, fairly B releases, this was going to be the film that was going to make or break his career. And 20th Century Fox was taking a big risk. But it was a known franchise, and I'm sure the sci-fi action elements of the Terminator were a good selling point for this film. I think we could fairly say that Aliens is the film that is the make or break point of James Cameron's career. And he stepped up and he did outstanding. Because one thing that is strange about Aliens to Alien, I would put it out there that this is one of the rare cases where a sequel is more popular than the original film. That could just be because of the action sense to it. It could be because how it has spun off into video game franchises so well, how it led to furthering the series. But it's a film that could be a standalone film with no problem. You don't have to have seen the first one. And frankly, I think more people watch Aliens than Alien, until recently, where Alien got a big resurgence, particularly around its 40th anniversary. So we're in a time where James Cameron is kind of the risk factor of 20th Century Fox. And if you want to go back to my Planet of the Apes episodes, you'll see they're a company that's used to taking risks with science fiction franchises. But what I will also say that is different here compared to Alien is with Aliens, Cameron also, I would say this is a purer auteur kind of film than Alien, where Alien was kind of this conglomerate, multiple artists working together to reach a goal. This is pretty fairly Cameron's vision. There's a lot of changes between Alien and Aliens in feel and tone that I would say is very Cameron in nature. Talking more about Cameron's career, I mean, we know right from here he's going to make Terminator 2, he's going to make The Abyss, eventually he will make Titanic and Avatar, which are 2 of the highest grossing films in box office sales in history. I think it's fair to say that he knew what he was doing, and he knew how to get where he wanted to be. So him having a clear vision is not a strange thing for someone on their 3rd film, even if it's a big, huge, massive production like this. Other things, other people that I want to point out, again, where I'm saying this is an auteur film, you don't have all of the creative elements quite as heavy-handedly as you did in Alien that were working together to create this story, where Aliens, I think it is one person's direct vision. Of course, that vision is made possible by the work of many special effects artists and designers and all the people who took everything from Alien to the next level. But also remembering that the core look and style of the creature itself has already been kind of set, and they will advance it, but they already have far beyond a template to work with. So that's another reason why I would think that this is definitely a proof that this is far more of an auteur film. Going through the cast a little bit more, like I said, we got Sigourney Weaver. Last episode, of course, we went through more about her. Of course, she has a vast career. Thinking she makes Ghostbusters, and also she does, of course, go on to pair up again with Cameron much later to make Avatar. So, Paul Reiser, on the other hand, far more known for comedies and sitcoms and things like that. In the 90s, I mean, he was one of the 2 dads in My 2 Dads. He was part of the prototypical, New York couple in Mad About You. So he's more of the sitcom guy who doesn't have a ton of movies under his belt. But I will mention now, of course, he's also been a part of Stranger Things. So we're kind of looping back into genre a little bit. Next, I will say Michael Biehn. Biehn being the hero character in the original Terminator, who's going to help Sarah Connor so that the Terminator doesn't get her. He also shows up in other Cameron projects like The Abyss, and for genre fans, he's part of Grindhouse. So Biehn is definitely steeped in genre work. Tons of work though. Next down the line, speaking of people who are steeped in genre work, we have Lance Hendrickson, who goes straight from this to Near Dark, which is one of my personal favorite films, one of my favorite vampire films of all time. I mean, most people, I think, when they think of Lance Hendrickson, they think of either Aliens or Pumpkinhead, but Mr. Genre, he has been in tons of horror, sci-fi, action, all of it. The next name to go through in this is Bill Paxton. Paxton, who's one of the few people, I think, who has been in both, or all three franchises of Alien, Terminator, and Predator. He's also been in movies that I love, like Twister. He's another one who went straight on to Near Dark from this. And for you genre fans out there, I remember this like being a rental, Brain Dead, which is a really creepy, kind of strange cerebral horror film. So Paxton, another person, had like 100 credits to his name. Next I would say is Jeanette Goldstein, who here we know her as Vasquez. She's the other part who goes on to Near Dark from this directly. She also has small parts in other Cameron films, like in Terminator 2, she's the mom who is the morphed version of the T-1000 in one part, and she's also, or the foster mom, I should say, and she's also, I believe she has a small role in Titanic as well. We have people who aren't just genre names, but they're people who work with Cameron quite a bit. So John Cameron is one of those people who kind of forms a crew around him, so I always enjoy that. So talking about Aliens as its own thing, what makes Aliens strange and different and new compared to what was before in Alien? Well, Aliens, like I said, we add these Space Marines. So with the Space Marines, we have this whole new aspect of kind of a militarized future. And I would argue this is probably one of the first instances where we see this in such a kind of a detailed way. It's like we're riding along with them, which is cool. And it's I think it becomes a trope after this because this film is so successful at doing this. And in just as much as how Alien is very much an ensemble cast, Aliens is because of that Space Marine kind of element. The fact that we are working with the known entity of we know the creature now, they still do extremely well in hiding it and blending it. And what's now maybe where the intense horror before was not knowing what the alien was. Now it is knowing what the alien was and kind of seeing this destructive path that it leaves that they come to inspect and knowing it could be around the corner. So what I think the camera team does an amazing job here in the design crew is by using shadow and color and light to hide and blend the alien creatures, so when they do step out, it's very impressive. I would say things like the use of a red light throughout this kind of destructed compound that they're going through kind of masks and puts us at alarm at the same time. So I think that they're playing with these elements in a way that doesn't just make it feel like an action film, but is still sharing that element of suspense, which still keeps us, very footed within horror. And obviously we're in outer space, so science fiction, and then they're all alien creatures, we get it. So we're definitely in those zones. Ripley is a character, so she's definitely evolved beyond just being the kind of headstrong, kind of smart crew member of the first film to now being this kind of almost oracle of what's to come, because she's warning them and they don't take the warning, so she has to go with them to prove it. On top of that, you see her kind of advance to be far more physical than she was in the first film. whereas before it was all about being cerebral and maybe kind of outsmarting it a bit. Now we're also going to add that element, especially because she's surrounded by a bunch of Marines with tons of huge guns. She's going to take on that mantle as well, and she's like, all right, well, teach me this too, and let me learn to be just as good a fighter as you are, which is, a great element. I will at that point also note, one thing I fully appreciate about Aliens is that many films where you have a male-female dynamic within it would easily go for this kind of rushed romance, or this kind of tacked on sexual tension between characters, even though they're in the middle of a life-death situation and they have literally hours to solve the problem. Many horror films and action films and science fiction films go for this unnecessary trope of latching people together so that we have this kind of, now we're cheering on this couple that they have to get out together. And where you do see her bond with the character of Hicks, Michael Baine's character, it's more like a mutual admiration society. They're forming a friendship. And where I have read quite a bit that is kind of imposing on the idea of them being a family unit with the character of Newt, the small girl they find, who's the sole survivor on the colony, I still enjoy the fact that they don't go there. They feel there's no need to. The most you get is him training her how to use the gun, and they're very physically close together. But there's no added humor to it or added kind of moments of tension for no reason. They both know they have like hours to live. We don't have time for this. And it makes sense. I appreciate that, because you would think that the character of Ripley, particularly knowing her from the first film, she very clearly knows she does not have time for this. Let's get down to it. I'm a very, to the point person. So I appreciate that a lot. The character of Newt, like I said, so it's a little girl who survives by kind of hiding from the aliens. She, and I've read quite a bit, has been analyzed about her posing Ripley as a mother character and putting Ripley into that situation. We're taking the themes of motherhood that we see from the first film, or at least, if not motherhood, we could see in the first film, female gender as an overall visual theme. The womb-like caverns, and we discussed all this last time. But so in this one, there's an emphasis in most analysis of the film on the idea of American family unit between Hicks, Ripley, and Newt, or just the bond of motherhood and child with Newt that Ripley forms. Considering we start the film learning that Ripley just lost her child, who was no longer a child because of her lapse in time, we feel that she definitely takes her on as a bit of a surrogate. And why is it her? There's other women on this team. There's actually, I think, 3 women on the team, and it's Ripley but Ripley is also the only one who's not military in that unit who is a woman. Perhaps she feels a bond also because her and this child have a lot in common. She survived an encounter with the Xenomorphs. Child did too. So, as much as there's read into that, I feel that there's 2 ways of mutual kind of admiration societies going on here that I appreciate in this film. But yeah, we could say that it becomes almost like a family unit. Bringing up the idea of the Xenomorph reminds me, I believe this is also the first time Cameron is the first person to use the term Xenomorph within the context of the film. So they do actually name it. The military does call them Xenomorphs, where the troopers themselves, the Marines, call them bugs. Which also gives the impression they've encountered them before. So that's definitely Cameron's footprint onto this franchise. But the military aspect of it is definitely one of the things that I think made this film so much different from the first. And I think you needed that. You couldn't make Alien 2. But perhaps maybe that's why the S. To kind of give people the heads up. This isn't going to be the same movie again, right? And it's also to emphasize the fact that there's a lot more of them now. Again, going back to that idea of using shadows and color to kind of, especially using crawl spaces, to kind of mask the Xenomorphs within the atmosphere. It also masks the numbers. We don't know how many there are. It seems like there could be dozens or even hundreds, or it's more likely maybe a half dozen guys who are suited up. The first film doesn't have that feeling of quite as vast a number. Yes, there's tons of eggs, and here we see the kind of the fields of eggs as well. But this film, I think, kind of adds the S because it's upping the threat. And of course, when you get up the threat, we're going to have to talk about the Queen. So this is where Aliens also, Cameron very much had to find a way to up the ante. Okay, they already know what the Xenomorph look like. What can we do that's going to scare them after we've seen the Xenomorph yet again? Yeah, we make a lot of them, but is that going to be enough? So we come across the idea of the Queen alien. So the Xenomorph, the alien Queen, she is the direct competition of Ripley. Ripley sees her as, if I wipe her out, I'm wiping this out. Again, we go back to that idea of, if Ripley represents motherhood in this film, the pure and human mother, we have this distorted and twisted and dark idea of the mother within the Queen. So it's Ripley fighting the Queen. In this instance, it's also kind of up the ante and evolved from the end of the first film. So we ending the second film, you know, iconic, of course, that moment where Ripley's in the loader, which we had that little scene earlier to prove that she could use the loader. Well, we have her figure that loader is the best way to fight the Queen, and that fight echoes with this evolution of the fight in the original at the end of the first film, where it's just her in the capsule with the Xenomorph. So that upping of that ante, the evolving of the threats on either side, right? Because Ripley too is kind of, she's beefed herself up. She's kind of leveled up herself. The Queen is a leveled up, evolved version of all the other Xenomorphs we've met. And of course it's a fight over Newt, right? Because it's the, you know, what's the classic line from this one is, "Get your hands off her, you bitch," you know, that kind of thing. We have these iconic moments. So she's in the front loader, the Xenomorph, the Queen approaches Newt. Ripley steps up to the threat. "Get your hand off her, you bitch." You know, so this is this kind of evolved, but it's this threat. It's the fight over the child. It's the two mother figures. And of course, not only do we know Ripley wins because we see her kind of defeat the Queen, but also because Newt then calls her mommy at that point. So yeah, I see those kind of analysis. I see where that plays too. Interesting in a story written and directed by a man to see how it all kind of revolves around motherhood. Interesting. So I think there's a lot of things about Aliens that I think separate it and at the same time help to make Alien as a cycle happen. It kept the franchise going, which was something that it was, you know, again, it wasn't just make or break as Cameron, but it was make or break, is this a two-parter, or will this be a series? So I definitely think Aliens stands its own and is just as important, maybe not just as important as Alien, but still a very important film. I'll say personally, I've maybe seen Aliens before this week. I probably saw it front to end 3 or 4 times. I saw Alien probably at least a dozen times. But both of them are films, I'll say, if you catch them on TV, I would watch them from the middle many times. So where Aliens, I may not have sat down and actually, like, I'm going to watch from beginning to end as often. I still, you know, if that's a movie that I'm going around and it was on, I definitely saw it many times on cable. So there's also, I would say, in story elements, there's kind of 3 moments here that we see of foreshadowing. Like I mentioned, we had that foreshadowing moment of Ripley now has this new skill of using the loaders, and then of course she has to show that skill off to make herself useful around the Marines because she doesn't want to just be a passenger. So they've seen it, we've seen it. That's totally setting us up for the grand finale. So that's definitely a point of foreshadowing. Another part would be carrying over from her experience of the first film. We see a scene in the lunchroom where she first finds out that Lance Hendrickson's character, Bishop, is an android. He is not human, he is an artificial. So she, because of her experiences last time, remembers artificial, bad, caused everything to go to hell, can't trust them. And she's carrying that through. And it's her, she's kind of telegraphing that to us as the audience. There's several moments within the film that are set up to make us agree with her. Oh my god, yeah, Bishop's going to be a bad guy. He's going to, in the end, he's going to end up turning out to be, he's made by the corporation to work for the corporate. He'll be another corporate lackey. Where Burke is the one who's really sabotaging the entire mission throughout because he is concerned with the corporation's interest, not the people's interest. So we've set up this kind of repetition of android bad. Of course, this is so that we are just as surprised as Ripley is when, in the end, he's the one who is the only one left, really, to come to her aid. So Bishop really does help save the day. And so they spend a lot of time in this film making us not expect that, expecting him to kind of, at the end, help. Or you know, try to bring back an alien just like last time. And then the other moment that I want to kind of bring up is Ripley, when we first see her wake up in the we have like a dream within a dream, or with a dream within a moment of reality sequence. So we have this dream sequence of her waking up in the hospital, talking to Burke, getting Jonesy back. All of this goes down as it really does, but then we slip into her dream, which is a nightmare of, it turns out she gets here just to find out, chest burster. That is to foreshadow that she will encounter chest bursters in the future, obviously, but also there's a sequence where she watches over the head cams of the Marines a cocooned figure go through that as well. So that's, if not foreshadowing, I'll say that is a visual reminder. That scene plus all of this anti-android stuff is to make sure people who didn't see Alien are on board, or if it's been a while, you'll too remember these are two things she's very scared of. And these are why she's, you know, has nightmares every night, and, you know, all of this. I would also like to say that this is interesting to me, watching this film, thinking of it as a Cameron film, whereas the original Terminator is, and we'll talk about the Terminator films in the future, believe me, but the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, is sent back in time to kill Sarah Connor in the first film. But in the sequel, the Terminator is sent back to rescue Sarah Connor. So I like to think that this may have been a moment of Cameron in process, right? Because in Aliens, we find out, wait, androids can help society. So that's like my own little theory in the back of my head. I got no proof that Cameron was sitting there like, oh, we can evolve and AI can get better, and I don't know. Just an interesting thought to me this time, that perhaps Aliens is the link between why the Terminator can go from a bad guy to a good guy. I don't know. Just kind of caught me. Again, I will say Aliens, just like Alien, is a film full of amazing matte work, amazing miniature work, amazing design and costuming and effects work. And I think this is a carry through from the first film's dynamic of, we have to, here's the bar, now we gotta step it up. So I fully appreciate that they don't just kind of mimic everything you saw in the first film. They kind of, there's this huge team of making these new ships and these new weapons and all of this to kind of, remember, we gotta say that 57 years have passed, so there has to have been an evolution of technology. So I really appreciate that in the design work. I also feel, and maybe this is with eyes of now, looking at a film made in 1986, I feel like they spent a good amount of time really early off when you meet the Marines to prove to you that in the future the military has become not just a white bread kind of male dominated entity, that at this point we are not necessarily an American Corps but an Earth Corps, and in being an Earth Corps we have a more diverse, I feel like they're spending a lot of time showing you how diverse they are, right? Like there's men and women, there's people of different ethnicities, there are people of different races and gendering and sexual orientations. So I'm not sure if this is trying to be forward thinking. I'm just saying perhaps this is a proof of showing what we think the future will be. Like we will have less diminishing of differences. So just something I noticed in this that I felt like, wow, we're really spending a lot of time making sure you see everybody is different, and we're going to hear all these different accents, and we're going to hear table talk that kind of, says everybody's getting along and they're not fighting amongst themselves. There's quibbling, but it all seems to be like jesting with each other, like they're joking around. It's not, nothing felt particularly hateful. So that's just a takeaway. I'm not sure, others may not have seen it that way, but I just felt this was the filmmakers trying to be like, hey, in the future we're all cool with each other, So that's interesting. Going back to that idea of Ripley not trusting Bishop, we do see, and these are like I said, there's these moments where they're trying to maybe telegraph to us that perhaps we shouldn't trust him, because we see his fascination with them, with the alien creatures, and him dissecting the face hugger, and him kind of just taking in everything about them, and he starts giving like this kind of science-y kind of diatribe, and she's like, well, this is great, but what does this do to help us? We can't, how do we don't know how to kill it, we just know it does this. Okay, so showing moments of him being fascinated with this creature does bring us back to the idea of perhaps an alien that we are assessing, do we want to bring this back, and him being part of the machine working for, well, you know, the corporation. So that was definitely something. And of course that kind of comes to the fruition at the end where, you know, she tells Bishop, you know, after he helps them and rescues them, you've done a good job. You really did a good job. And he's like, oh, you didn't do too bad for a human. So that little kind of is kind of the cherry on top of her finally coming over to the side of, maybe they're not bad. Of course, it doesn't end well for him, but for a moment there, Ripley and Bishop might have been friends. My top points then about Aliens. Here are my reasons it's an important film. Here's my bullet points for you guys. First one, this is James Cameron coming into his own. This is an auteur film, setting up the kind of make or break point in his career, and setting up probably his opus, which is, to me, Terminator 2. I know there's people out there who probably say, oh, Avatar. I'm not a fan. But Terminator 2 comes after Aliens, and I feel like this is the film that makes that happen. I still love Terminator, but T2 is just a perfect film. So that's number one. Number two, we're again going to this ensemble cast, and it's a film that kind of supports that really well by bonding the characters, especially through not just being on a mission together, like an away mission where they're forced together, but they are Marines, and we feel like they've gone through this experience together. For most of them, they have this kind of camaraderie built in. So 3 of these actors go on to make Near Dark next. Not a Cameron film, but a Catherine Bigelow film, who is, I don't believe they're married yet, but Bigelow kind of latches onto this crew. We have 3 cast members in Terminator 1. Bain and Goldstein go on to have small parts in T2. And like I said, Sigourney Weaver's in Avatar. So this ensemble cast also being very close to Cameron as a director. We have an evolving concept. I'll say number 3 is the evolving concept that AI can be a good positive thing, or at least artificial people, androids, can be a good aspect. It can be helpful in the future. I think this is an evolution point for that. So that's my 3. Number 4, it's, like I said, one of those rare moments where you get a sequel that's almost more popular than the original. That leads into my number 5, which is that this is a film that leads to the Space Marine becoming a trope. Where Space Marines had probably existed in other science fiction before this, I think after this we see the proliferation of things with Space Marines like Doom and Quake. So it's very popular in video games. Of course, it goes on to be in lots of movies, sequels, and all that. But I think this is where we kind of really establish that trope of the Space Marine. I'm going to say we bring over 2 important themes from Alien, which is the anti-corporation. The corporation obviously owns everything, obviously is only out for themselves, and that leads to anti-colonization, or anti-colonialism. And we see this anti-colonialism in this literal colony that is terraforming an alien place to make it habitable for humans. We don't have any purpose in being there, and aliens invade it to make it even more proved, to make that even clearer. So that's another point I wanted to make. And then, of course, we have Ripley becoming the action hero in this film, and those close ties with her themes in motherhood. So I think Aliens has got a lot going for it by itself. I will say I watched, like I said, the Alien Anthology Blu-ray box set. Beautiful, crisp transfer. I loved it. I watched the original and the director's cut, but I was surprised that there weren't any documentaries, kind of retrospect documentaries, looking at the film. I will say, on the very last disc, there's some really cool stuff carried over from previous special editions, like the Laserdisc. Tons of behind-the-scenes photos and scripts and all that kind of stuff. Notes, animatics, trailers, all that. But the coolest thing on those extras from the Laserdisc is the trailer and playthrough of the boardwalk style, or the amusement park style ride that apparently had been made for a park in San Francisco, I believe, based on Aliens, where you are a space marine and you have to go back and you have to go through the tank, and it's like first person going through, and you know, the aliens jump out and all that. Cool thing about that, even cooler the fact that there was an Aliens ride, was that video has Jeffrey Combs in it. That's pretty cool. So definitely check out those extras if you have this set. Of all of the things that were in the extended cut versus the original cut, probably the biggest difference is very early when we first hear mention of the colony. It actually goes to a scene that takes place on the colony while it's fully inhabited, people working and living there, and you see Newt's family on a kind of away mission, and they find an alien ship, and that's where it all goes wrong. So we actually see what the colony is like before the Marines show up later. So that was interesting. That was probably the biggest moment that was from the extended cut. One other moment that was interesting, there was a lot of little bits and pieces throughout, but one of the other moments that was interesting is right before Ripley goes off to fight the Queen. There is a moment where she says, I'm gonna do this, you know, to Hicks, I'll be back, I'll take care of it, do this for you. And he gives her his first name, and she gives her his. And it's just definitely a moment that kind of definitely makes this human people. And that was a small thing that I'm kind of surprised they cut out. But that's the only other thing that I think was fairly significant from the extended cut. 20 minutes extra. So just to end off today with other versions that you can get of Alien. Like I said last time, I have the triple pack. There was apparently a quad pack also on DVD. Some extras on there. And my husband has the special edition of just Aliens, which he's gotten so that he can get it autographed at shows. So there's definitely plenty of ways out there to get Aliens. Definitely give it another try if you haven't watched it in a while. Well, that's it for us today. Thanks for watching The Horror Academic, and I will see you next time.